What happens when a billionaire's first love, a black woman who once held his entire world in her hands, vanishes without a trace? This is the emotional love story of Garrett Stone, a man whose wealth could buy anything except the one thing he truly wanted: her. Tonight, we bring you a tale of lost love, redemption, and a reunion so powerful it will restore your faith in destiny. This is the story of how love survives even the cruelest betrayals, and how justice eventually finds its way to those who deserve it most. We love hearing from our global family, so drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. The business deal that brought Garrett Stone to Austin was worth approximately $300 million, a tech firm acquisition that would expand his company's reach into the Southwest market. His team had handled most of the negotiations remotely, but Garrett insisted on being present for the final signing. "You don't need to fly to Texas for a signature," his business partner Thomas Rivera had said. "We can handle this." But Garrett had gone anyway, driven by instincts he didn't fully understand. Some restlessness in his soul that said he needed to be there, needed to be in that city at that moment. The signing took place on a Friday afternoon. By evening, Garrett was done with dinners and handshakes and corporate small talk. He ditched his security detail, much to their frustration, and slipped out of the Four Seasons alone, craving anonymity, craving quiet, craving something he couldn't quite name. Austin in November was beautiful, and Garrett walked without direction, his hands in the pockets of his expensive coat, letting his feet carry him through downtown toward a soup kitchen he'd donated to anonymously over the years. He'd always wondered where his money went. Tonight, on impulse, he decided to see. Inside, the warmth was a stark contrast to the bitter evening chill. The space was humble but clean, filled with the quiet sounds of people seeking refuge from the streets. Volunteers moved between tables, and people sat hunched over their meals, some alone, some in small groups. Each face told a story of hardship that Garrett's billions could never fully comprehend, yet each person was here, surviving. Garrett stood near the entrance, observing, feeling the weight of privilege and the strange emptiness that came with it. He'd built an empire, but standing here, watching people find dignity in a bowl of soup, he felt the hollowness of it all. He had once been there. His gray eyes scanned the room absently, until they stopped on a figure near the back. A woman sat alone at a corner table, her head bowed over her meal. She was thin, her clothes worn but clean, her hands wrapped around a cup of soup like it was the most precious thing in the world. There was something about the way she held herself, a grace that poverty couldn't quite erase, a dignity in the curve of her shoulders even as they hunched against the weight of whatever had brought her here. Garrett found himself moving closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. But as he approached, she lifted her head slightly to take a sip of soup, and the overhead light caught her profile. Garrett's world stopped, time fractured. His heart forgot how to beat, his lungs forgot how to breathe. It couldn't be. 12 years, thousands of miles from Seattle. But he'd know that profile anywhere, had memorized it in a high school library, had carried it in his memory through every success and failure. Through 12 years of searching and hoping and dreaming, the graceful line of her jaw, the curve of her cheekbone, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, even now, even here. Naomi. His first love, his only love. The woman who'd seen him when invisible at his lowest, and never knew she'd stolen his heart in the process. But she was supposed to be in Seattle, married, thriving, living the life she deserved. Not here, not in a soup kitchen, not looking like life had beaten her down and left her for dead. What happened to her? The question roared through his mind, but his feet were already moving, carrying him forward on instinct and 12 years of longing. He crossed the space between them, his expensive shoes silent on the worn floor, his heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. She didn't notice him approaching. She was too focused on her soup, eating slowly, deliberately, like someone who'd learned to make small portions last. Her hands trembled slightly, from cold or hunger or exhaustion, he couldn't tell. Garrett stopped beside her table. His shadow fell across her bowl. She tensed immediately, her body going rigid. "I'm not looking for trouble," she said quietly, not looking up, her voice rough from disuse but still unmistakably hers. That voice. God, that voice. Rougher than he remembered, worn by time and hardship, but still hers. Naomi, just her name. One word carrying 12 years of grief, love, searching, hoping, praying. She froze completely. The plastic spoon in her hand hovered halfway to her mouth, soup dripping back into the bowl. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't breathe. Like if she stayed perfectly still, this moment wouldn't be real. Then slowly, so slowly, she looked up. The moment their eyes met, Garrett felt like he'd been struck by lightning. Those warm brown eyes that had haunted his dreams, that he'd spent 12 years searching for, that he'd convinced himself he'd never see again. They were staring at him now, wide with disbelief. Recognition flashed across her face, then shock, then absolute horror. No. The word came out strangled. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor, her hands shaking so badly she nearly knocked over her soup. "No, this isn't. You're not. It's me, Naomi. It's Garrett." She backed away from the table, shaking her head frantically, panic rising in her chest like a tidal wave. Of all the people, in all the places, why him? Why now, when she was at her lowest, when she had nothing left, when she was barely surviving? "You need to leave." Her voice cracked, tears already forming in her eyes. "Please. Just go. You can't see me like this. You can't." But Garrett Stone hadn't become a billionaire by giving up when things got difficult. And this was the only thing that had ever truly mattered. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly, firmly, his gray eyes never leaving hers. "Not again. Not without you. 12 years of walls, of surviving, of protecting what little pride she had left, it all crumbled in an instant." "Look at me, Garrett," the words burst from her, anguished and raw, her voice rising in the quiet soup kitchen. Around them, people turned to look, but neither of them noticed. "Look at what I've become. Is this what you wanted to see? Your friend from high school, the one who was going to change the world, eating in a soup kitchen? Living on the streets? Is this satisfying enough for you?" "Satisfying?" Garrett took a step closer, his voice low and intense. "Naomi, I've spent 12 years searching for you. 12 years hoping, praying that I'd find you again. And you think I care where you're eating? You think I care about anything except that you're here, you're real, and in front of me?" Tears streamed down her face, hot and unstoppable. "I have nothing. I am nothing. The woman you remember? She doesn't exist anymore." "You're wrong," Garrett said, and there was something fierce in his voice. Something that made her pause in her panic. "I see the woman who believed in me when I was nobody. I see the only woman I've ever loved. That's who you are, Naomi Clark. That's who you've always been, and circumstances don't change that." She stared at him, her breath coming in short gasps, her world tilting on an axis she didn't understand. "What did you just say?" Garrett took another step closer, closing the distance between them. He cupped her face gently, his touch infinitely tender despite the strength in his hands. "I said I love you," he repeated, his voice breaking slightly. "I've loved you since I was 17. I've loved you through 12 years of silence and distance. I've loved you through achieving everything except the one thing that mattered. I've loved you through every failed relationship because none of them were you. And I'm standing here now, looking at you, and I'm still in love with you. I never stopped." Naomi's legs gave out. She would have collapsed if Garrett hadn't caught her, pulling her against his chest, holding her while she sobbed. 12 years of unspoken love on his part, 2 years of unbearable pain on hers. "You loved me? In high school? But you never said anything. You never—" "I know," Garrett murmured into her hair, his arms tightening around her. I know, baby. I was too scared, too convinced I wasn't good enough for you. And then we lost touch. And by the time I'd made something of myself, by the time I had something to offer you, I was married, Naomi whispered, pulling back to look at him. You found out I was married. Yeah. His gray eyes were bright with unshed tears. I found out you were married to Julian Harper, and I thought you were happy. I thought you had the life you deserved. So I backed off. I stopped searching, but I never stopped loving you. Julian destroyed me, Naomi said, her voice hollow. He destroyed everything. Garrett's jaw tightened, his hands gentle on her arms even as fury flashed in his eyes. Then tell me what happened. Tell me everything, and then let me help you fix it. Around them, the soup kitchen had gone quiet, and volunteers and guests alike watched this scene unfold. Naomi, please, come with me. Let me get you somewhere warm and safe, and then when you're ready, tell me everything. Garrett spoke in a voice soft. Garrett, you can't just swoop in and... Why not? He asked simply. I've been waiting 12 years for the chance to take care of you. Please, please let me do this. Naomi looked into those gray eyes, eyes that held no pity, only love and determination, and something that looked an awful lot like hope. Okay, she whispered, okay. In the back of Garrett's car, a sleek black sedan that felt absurdly luxurious after 2 years of sleeping on benches, Naomi stared out the window at the city lights, feeling like she'd stepped out of a nightmare into a dream she was afraid to believe in. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Garrett, sitting beside her, took her hand gently. Of what? That I'll wake up. That this is a hallucination. That I'll open my eyes and still be on the street. This is real, Garrett assured her, his thumb rubbing circles on the back of her hand. I'm real, and I'm not going anywhere. You're safe now, Naomi. I promise you're safe. She turned to look at him. This man who'd grown from a scared boy she'd befriended in high school to someone powerful and commanding, but whose eyes still held the same gentleness she remembered. You said you loved me, she said softly. In high school. But I never knew. You never said anything. I was terrified, Garrett admitted. You were brilliant, beautiful, destined for greatness, and I was the scholarship kid who couldn't even afford lunch. What did I have to offer you except dreams that seemed impossible? Naomi's breath caught as a memory surfaced, a memory she hadn't thought about in years. Garrett Stone remembers the exact moment he fell in love with Naomi Clark. He was 17 years old, a hungry but poor kid sitting alone in the high school library during lunch period, trying to disappear into the pages of a physics textbook, because disappearing was easier than facing another day of being invisible. He didn't hear her approach, but just suddenly became aware of someone standing beside his table. And when he looked up, there she was, Naomi Clark. Every boy in school knew who she was, beautiful in a way that seemed effortless, with caramel skin that glowed like she carried sunlight within her, natural curls that framed her face like a crown. But more than that, she was brilliant. Top of every class, headed for greatness. The kind of girl who existed in a different stratosphere from guys like Garrett. You're Garrett, right? She said, her voice warm and kind. You're in my AP calculus class. He nodded, too surprised to speak. There and then their friendship began, and an unspoken, unrequited love began to bloom in his lonely heart. They studied together, shared their dreams and visions. She talked about her dreams of becoming an architect, and he shared his tentative hopes of maybe, somehow, starting his own business someday. You're going to do it, Garrett, she told him one afternoon, her eyes serious and certain. I can see it in you. You're going to build something extraordinary. He wanted to tell her then. Wanted to say that she was extraordinary, that every moment with her felt like breathing for the first time, that he loved her in a way that terrified him, but he didn't. Because girls like Naomi Clark didn't fall for guys like Garrett Stone. Because he had nothing to offer her except dreams and determination. because she deserved someone who could give her the world, not someone who couldn't even afford lunch. Senior year ended, and they promised to stay in touch, but life pulled them in different directions. Naomi went to Cornell on a full scholarship, while Garrett cobbled together student loans and worked 3 jobs to make it through a state school. The emails became less frequent, and then they stopped altogether. Garrett told himself it was better this way. Told himself that loving someone from a distance was enough. Told himself that he'd make something of himself, and maybe someday, when he was worthy, their paths would cross again. "I remember that day," Naomi said softly in the car, tears streaming down her face. "At the library. I remember seeing you leave the cafeteria. I remember knowing exactly why you left." Garrett turned to her, surprised. "You knew?" "I knew you had no lunch and was lonely," Naomi admitted. "I always packed extra food for you and I didn't think anything of it," she continued. "You were my friend, you were brilliant and kind, and you were struggling, and I had the ability to help. It seemed simple, I never knew." Her voice broke. "I never knew you loved me." "How could you?" Garrett said gently. "I never told you. I was too scared, too convinced I wasn't good enough. And I was too focused on my ambitions to see what was right in front of me," Naomi said. "God, Garrett, if I'd known..." "Would it have changed anything?" Garrett asked. "Be honest. If I'd told you I loved you when we were 17, would you have felt the same way?" Naomi was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I don't know," she admitted. "I loved you as a friend. I cared about you deeply. But I was so focused on getting out, on building my career, on making something of myself. Romance wasn't even on my radar. She paused. "I might have broken your heart." "Maybe," Garrett acknowledged. "Or maybe we would have tried and failed, or maybe we would have succeeded. We'll never know. But Naomi, I don't regret not telling you then, because maybe we both needed those 12 years. Maybe we needed to become who we are now before we could be together. Except who I am now is a homeless woman with no career and no future," Naomi said bitterly. "No," Garrett said firmly. "Who you are now is a survivor, someone who endured something that would have broken most people. That's who I see, Naomi, that's who I love. If you're feeling this story in your soul, do us a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this with someone who needs to believe in love today. Also do well to turn on the notification bell. Trust us, you won't want to miss any of our stories." The penthouse suite at the Four Seasons was more luxury than Naomi had seen in years. Naomi took the longest shower of her life, and when she emerged in a hotel robe, her natural curls damp and clean for the first time in weeks, Garrett had food waiting, real food, a feast spread across the dining table. "I didn't know what you liked anymore," he said almost shyly, "so I ordered a lot." Naomi sat down slowly, overwhelmed. She ate slowly, and Garrett waited patiently, just watching her, gratitude and love written plainly on his face. "I'm broken, Garrett," she said quietly when she was done eating. "Then tell me what broke you," Garrett said. "Tell me the whole story from the beginning. What happened after high school? What happened with Julian? How did you end up here?" So Naomi told him. The words came haltingly at first, then faster, 12 years of life pouring out like water breaching a dam. She told him about graduating top of her class and joining Donovan Partners in Seattle, one of the most prestigious architectural firms in the Pacific Northwest. Marriage wasn't even on my mind until I met Julian Harper at an industry event. He was handsome, charming, came from old money, and he seemed to admire my ambition. He said he'd never met anyone like me, Naomi said. Garrett's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, letting her continue. We dated for 2 years before he proposed, and I already have several successful projects under my belt. Julian seemed supportive, celebrated my successes, and I thought we were partners. She paused, taking a shaky breath. The first year of marriage was good, but slowly things changed. He started making comments about how much I worked and how I was always putting my ambitions before him. I tried to balance it, tried to be the wife he wanted while maintaining the career I'd built. But it was never enough. Garrett reached across the table and took her hand. She squeezed it gratefully, drawing strength from his presence. Then came the Riverside Commons project, Naomi continued, her voice dropping. It was going to be my masterpiece. A mixed-use development that balanced commercial viability with environmental sustainability. Revolutionary design. 2 years of my soul poured into every detail. The praise from urban planners, the articles in architectural magazines. It should have been the pinnacle of my career. What happened? Garrett asked softly, though rage was already building in his chest. Julian couldn't handle it, Naomi said simply. Couldn't handle that his wife was getting more attention than him. Couldn't handle being Mr. Clark at events. His ego couldn't take it. Tears started flowing again, but Naomi pushed through. The building collapsed after 3 months. Thank God it was at night. No one died, but several properties were destroyed, and the building was evacuated immediately. The investigation found inferior materials, altered specifications, corners cut to save money, and all the blame fell on me. But you didn't approve those changes, Garrett said, his voice tight. Of course I didn't, Naomi's voice rose, but somehow there were emails with my name, approval forms with signatures that looked like mine, documentation of conversations I'd never had. The evidence was airtight. And when I protested, when I said someone had sabotaged my designs, I sounded like I was refusing to take responsibility. Julian did it, Garrett stated. He falsified the evidence. I didn't know for sure until that night, Naomi said. I came home from another brutal meeting with investigators, and I looked at my husband. I didn't know what prompted me, and I asked him directly, "Did you do this? And you know what he did?" What? He smiled. The memory still had the power to chill her. He actually smiled and said, "You were so proud of that building. You needed to be reminded that you're not invincible, that your precious career isn't everything." He sabotaged my life's work, risked people's safety, destroyed my reputation, all because his ego couldn't handle having a successful wife. Garrett stood abruptly, his hands clenched into fists, pacing the room like a caged predator. That son of a... I left that night, Naomi continued. Hired a lawyer, tried to fight back, tried to prove the sabotage. But Julian comes from Sirius Moen and buried my legal team, making my protest sound like denial. The Washington State Architecture Board suspended my license. Donovan Partners fired me. Other firms wouldn't touch me. Who wants to hire an architect whose building failed? The divorce? Finalized quickly. Julian made sure I got as little as possible. Within 6 months, my savings were gone. Within a year, I couldn't make rent. She looked at Garrett, her eyes hollow with the memory. The descent was fast. I moved constantly, trying to outrun the stigma, but my reputation followed me. Eventually, I ended up here, in Austin. It was supposed to be a fresh start, but fresh starts require resources I didn't have. No job, no money, nowhere to go. And one day I found myself on the streets with a shopping cart containing everything I owned. 2 years, Garrett said, his voice thick. 2 years you've been living like this. 2 years of survival, Naomi confirmed. 2 years of wondering how my life came to this. And tonight I was drinking that soup bowl, planning to walk to the bridge and jump after dark. I was done, Garrett. I had nothing left. Garrett was in front of her in an instant, pulling her to her feet, his hands framing her face with desperate tenderness. But I found you, he said fiercely. Before you did something irreversible, before the world lost you forever, I found you. Do you understand what that means? It means you're supposed to be here. It means your story isn't over. It means we get another chance. A chance at what? Naomi whispered. I have nothing to offer you. You have you, Garrett said. That's all I've ever wanted. That's all I've ever needed. The brilliant architect, the homeless woman on the streets, the survivor who endured hell. You're all the same person to me, Naomi. You're the woman I love, and I'm going to help you get justice. I'm going to help you rebuild. and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure no one ever hurts you again. Over the next 2 weeks, Garrett's legal team, the best money could buy, built a case that was methodical and devastating. They interviewed construction workers who'd been pressured to use inferior materials, finding 3 who were willing to testify in exchange for immunity. They found the contractor Julian had bribed, a man named Derek Cole who'd been struggling with guilt for 2 years and was ready to come clean. They uncovered emails showing Julian's increasing obsession with his wife's success and his determination to teach her humility. And they found something else, something that made Garrett's blood run cold. They found 4 other women over the past 8 years, all talented professionals who rejected Julian's advances or overshadowed him professionally. All had their careers destroyed through similar means: falsified evidence, manufactured scandals, strategic sabotage. "He's a serial predator," Garrett said, his voice dangerous. "And the Harper family has been covering for him the entire time," the investigator confirmed. "Using their money and connections to bury complaints, intimidate victims, make problems disappear." When Garrett told Naomi, she went pale. "Other women? He did this to other women?" "At least 4 that we've found. There may be more." Garrett took her hands. "Naomi, this is bigger than just your case now. This is about stopping him from ever doing this again. This is about justice for every woman he's destroyed." Naomi was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then her jaw set with determination, the same determination Garrett remembered from high school, when she'd talk about her architectural dreams with fire in her eyes. "Then we go after him with everything we have," she said firmly. "Not just for me, for all of them, for every woman who couldn't fight back." "That's my girl," Garrett said, pride and love shining in his eyes. 3 weeks later, Garrett stood at a podium in front of a packed press conference room, Naomi beside him, her posture straight despite the nervousness evident in her trembling hands. Garrett reached over and squeezed her hand once, briefly, and they both addressed Julian's crimes after reporting to the appropriate authorities, and Naomi's innocence in a room full of reporters and cameras. The press conference made national headlines. By evening, Julian Harper was arrested at his Seattle office, let out in handcuffs while cameras rolled. The footage played on every news channel, the entitled son of old money, finally facing consequences. The Harper family's lawyers mounted an aggressive defense, but the evidence was overwhelming. The contractor and some construction workers testified about the bribes and threats. Digital forensics experts walked the jury through the metadata proving the designs had been altered on Julian's computer. And then, one by one, other victims came forward. Each woman told her story, and each story added another nail to Julian Harper's coffin. The trial lasted 3 months, and the jury deliberated for more than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Julian Harper was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for fraud, criminal sabotage, bribery, conspiracy, and harassment. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Naomi made a brief statement, thanking the other victims for their courage, and the jury for seeing through the Harper family's wealth and influence to the truth beneath. "This verdict doesn't erase the pain Julian Harper caused," she said, "but it proves that powerful people aren't above the law. It proves that victims who speak up can be heard. And it proves that justice, though sometimes slow, can still prevail." The Washington State Architecture Board issued a formal apology to Naomi the following week, reinstating her license with full honors and a commendation noting the injustice she'd suffered. Donovan Partners offered her a senior partnership with a public apology for their failure to support her during the investigation. Multiple firms competed for her attention, each one trying to convince her to join their team. But Naomi had other plans. "I want to start my own firm," she told Garrett over dinner one evening, 6 months after their reunion in that Austin soup kitchen. Clark Associates, a firm that focuses on sustainable, community-centered design. Buildings that serve people who've been forgotten by society. Like you were forgotten, Garrett said softly. Like I was forgotten, Naomi agreed. I want to use what I learned during those 2 years on the streets. I want to design housing for the homeless that preserves dignity. Community centers that actually serve their communities. Garrett smiled, that proud, fierce smile that made her heart skip. How much do you need to get started? Garrett, I'm not asking you for money. I know you're not asking, he interrupted gently. I'm offering, consider it an investment. Your settlement from the Harper family will eventually come through, but why wait? Let me help you start building your dream now. Naomi looked at this man who'd loved her silently for 12 years, who'd found her at her lowest point and refused to let her give up, who'd fought for her justice and now wanted to fund her future. Why, she asked softly, why do all of this for me? Garrett reached across the table and took her hand, his gray eyes intense and sincere. Because I love you, Naomi Clark. I've loved you since we were 17. I love who you were, who you are, and who you're becoming. I love that after everything you've been through, you still want to help others. I love that you're turning your pain into purpose, and I want to spend the rest of my life supporting your dreams, celebrating your victories, and reminding you every single day how extraordinary you are. Naomi felt tears prick her eyes, but these were good tears, happy tears, tears of wonder at how her life had transformed in 6 months. I don't know if I've said this clearly before, she said, her voice thick with emotion. But I'm in love with you too, Garrett. Not because you saved me, but because of who you are, kind and determined and patient. Because you've shown me what real love looks like. Because when I'm with you, I remember that I'm worth loving. Because you make me want to be the best version of myself. Garrett stood up, moved around the table, and pulled her to her feet. Say that again, he whispered, his hands framing her face. I love you, Naomi repeated, smiling through her tears. I'm in love with you, Garrett Stone. He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of 12 years of longing, 6 months of healing, and a lifetime of promises yet to be made. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. Naomi pulled back, her eyes wide. What? Marry me, Garrett repeated, and suddenly he was on one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. I bought this ring 6 years ago, right after I made my first million. I was going to propose if I ever found you. I've carried it ever since, waiting for the right moment. He opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring, simple but elegant, timeless and perfect. Naomi Clark, you are my first love and my only love. You're the reason I built an empire, and the reason nothing I achieved ever felt complete without you. You're the kindest person I've ever known, the strongest woman I've ever met, and the only future I've ever wanted. Will you marry me? Naomi looked down at him, this powerful, commanding man humbling himself before her, and felt her heart overflow with love so intense, it took her breath away. Yes, she said, dropping to her knees in front of him, taking his face in her hands. Yes, Garrett, 1,000 times yes. I'll marry you. I'll spend the rest of my life with you. I'll build a future with you, yes to everything. He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and kissed her again, sealing the promise they were making to each other. And in that moment, in that penthouse overlooking a city that had once seemed so cold and uncaring, 2 people who'd been separated by time and circumstance and life's cruelty finally found their way home, to each other. This story reminds us that love often grows quietly, waiting for its perfect moment to bloom. It teaches that our darkest seasons don't define us. They reveal our strength, and that justice, though delayed, will always find its way to the deserving. If you're hurting, forgotten, or on the edge of giving up, remember, your story isn't over. Somewhere, your breakthrough, your healing, and your love are already forming. One act of kindness, one choice to hold on, can change everything. Keep believing in love that endures, justice that prevails, and hope that never dies, because your best chapter may be just about to begin. Introducing our new ebook, Love After Loss, a gentle guide for every woman who's learning to love again after heartbreak. If you've been finding healing and hope through our stories, you can get your copy of Love After Loss using the link in the description below or the pinned comment. It's our way of walking beside you, one step at a time. Till next time, I wish you love and peace.